It's my honor to present my work. And the title today, my topic is AI ethics and interoperability issues in AI safety governance. And then, the table of content is the objective and AI safety, interoperability, and risk. And then I can suggest AI governance interoperability framework. And then there are several issues involved in the interoperability issues in AI safety governance. And then we have some sectoral result in South Korea, and then I'll make concluding remarks. And I'll skip this myself, an introduction. And then this is Korea's AI policy of presidential administration. Starting from Moon Jae-in administration, they made the concept of a so-called the human-centered AI ethics. In Yoon Suk-yeol government, one of the key noting phenomena is they promoted AI in everyday life, and thus they led the effort to create the so-called global digital bill of rights. And then current administration of Lee Jae-myung administration, they announced a vision for an AI-basic society and industry growth. And then also they decide to invest 100 trillion Korean won in AI industries. And looking at these kind of AI policy, more and more the AI safety governance becomes more and more important. And then there are several examples of AI safety, break cases. Because of the time, you can see the some looking at the category, then they make some descriptions and their impact there. And also, this interoperability issue, they have several concepts to be discussed. First, AI safety. Secondly, AI interoperability. And thirdly, AI risk. Let's focus on the on AI interoperability. It focuses on compatibility between AI systems and regulations. The core questions of this AI interoperability is how the different systems and rules work together. And the typical issues include regulatory mismatch, technical standard gaps, and privacy conflict. And so let me talk about the AI governance interoperability is their values. The importance can be found in it enhance global innovation efficiency, and also it strengthens international AI safety collaboration. It may reduce regulatory costs for companies, and also it could shift geopolitical power dynamics. So we can look at the necessity is some argument, and also their impact, we can see that. And then I make some comparison table of interoperability issues. There are several conflictual areas. So it includes ethics and principles, regulations, technical standard, cultural background, responsibility model, and cost burden. And then looking at these categories, we have a description, and also there are some examples of interoperability conflict. For example, in ethical principles, and there are some difference between EU and US fairness definition, and also in terms of regulatory strengths, EU AI Act versus voluntary guideline of Korea. In technical standards, there are, as you can imagine, there are some model, audit, format, mismatch. So so is this interoperability create several, conflictual area, and thus it can create some, burden to our society. So I classify the AI ethics governance interoperable barriers into three groups of barriers. First one is a regulatory and normal. So when looking at these conflict kind of barriers, we can solve the problems of looking at the top-down, either top-down or bottom-up, or in a hybrid kind of a way. So it also creates the interoperability barriers. It created the dilemma. For example, if we have a divergent ethical principles, and then interoperability barriers of a different definition of fairness, transparency, accountability, and also the dilemma is a system fair in one region may be unfair in another. In regulatory fragmentation, high compliance burden for cross-border AI, cultural and social values is a no universal standard for ethical AI. In terms of a transparency requirement, over transparency risks in intellectual property or under transparency harms trust. So there are dilemmas and there are some barriers in AI interoperability issues. So I kind of ask a question: does AI interoperability governance reduce or increase the burden to society? Let me say that in short term, it increased the burden, but in the long term wide, it reduced the burden because interoperability governance increased initial administration load. However, it significantly reduced long-term regulatory safety and coordination burdens for nations and industry. So ultimately, net long-term benefit will be persistent. So I'll make the comparison of AI interoperability with and without the governance. There are some, about, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 factors. And looking at these factors with the governance and without the governance. For example, if we have looking at the standard consistency, if we have with the governance, we can harmonize ethical, technical, and regulatory standard. But if we don't have, we can have the conflicting rules and fragmented, frameworks. And secondly, cross-border cooperation with the governance, we get easier data model sharing and global cooperation. On the other hand, if we don't have the governance, we can have the technological fragmentation and reduce cooperation. By same thing token, we can apply this looking at the factors we can compare with the governance and without the governance. This is kind of my suggestion of the interoperability in AI governance framework. On the top, I suggest some values, interoperability values. The second layer, I can suggest the objectives and value assignment. And the core layer includes a harmonization, collaboration platform, and compliance and integration system. The other three layers are kind of a supporting component. And finally, the transition architecture includes as is to be gap analysis and thus portfolio and project management. So this framework explanation, the first core component of a harmonization layer that aligns AI standard and policies across jurisdiction, facilitating mutual recognition agreement. Secondly, the collaboration platform is established for international collaboration, enabling data sharing and joint research. Third, compliance integration system is created to unify compliance management, automating compliance checks and reporting. And the other, let me skip them. And then we did some kind of exploratory type of research about the 5 dimensions of ethics research. We suggest the 5 dimensions of ethics: fairness, transparency, explainability, responsibility, and privacy. The issue here is whether or not these 5 dimensions can make significant contributions to value alignment. Value alignment is to set up the goals and behaviors of the AI system aligned with one's values, reference, and ethical principles. So we hypothesized not all dimensions make effect on the goal of AI system and the AI deployment. Consider leveraging values. For example, in cross-border electronic commerce transaction, it showed that only fairness, responsibility, and privacy does have a relationship with the value alignment, but the transparency and explainability dimensions do not. So, we talking about a lot of multi-dimensional type of dimensions of ethics and interoperability issues. So we need to kind of clarify more and more in terms of the in order to suggest the future directions. And this is a policy report that I involved in the some project for the last year. And this is a policy report by UN University of Macau. This policy report is Interoperability, AI Safety Governance, Ethics, Regulation, and Standard. This study includes country level report as well as global report. Country level report of China, UK, South Korea, and Singapore, and also it can be downloaded from United Nations University of Macau. And the title is, as I said, and this is ISBN number. So if you're interested in, you can download the whole report. And let me share the sector case result of South Korea. And we set up the research objective of assess Korea's AA safety framework in three sectors. One, autonomous vehicle. Second, education. Third, cross-border data flow. And then we make a scope analysis and we apply the methodology of document review and expert interviews and etc. And also we make an assessment framework. The principle is paper-centric design. And also we focus on transparency, accountability, fairness, dignity, and privacy. The approach is top-down and bottom-up and hybrid. And also we look at the compare international linkages such as GDPR, CBPR, UNEC, OECD, ISOs. And then the result is as follows. And then there are some policy priorities. For example, they have a consistent AI policy for education. Secondly, the autonomous vehicles, clear liability rules for level 4 to 5 autonomous vehicles. And also suggest the inclusion of SMEs in data governance, and finally, integration of AI risk management. In education sectors, the result shows normative versus practical interoperability. So in terms of the normative interoperability, Korea strongly aligns with the global norms. And in terms of practical interoperability, schools agreed with the policy goals but face inequality, student over-reliance on AI, and limited teacher capacity. So we have some results such which shows that norms are mature, but implementation remains incomplete and transitional. So while norms are aligned, the translation into suitable classroom practice remains incomplete. Education sectors. Let me share some implication things. In theoretical implication, distinguishing normative versus practical interoperability, expand the conceptual understanding of AI governance. And teacher and school function as primary across shaping actual governance. In terms of the policy recommendation, it strengthens policy stability and predictability through prior impact assessment and transparent consultation. Of course, there are some limitation of the research. So in terms of AI interoperability issues, we should prioritize which one is more important in the context of a certain situation. Next is some impact of ethic norms and policies on digital trade. We make three countries in comparison. The research question is how the ethics policies affect the digital service export. The research scope and methodology is research target is a comparative analysis of Korea, US, and Japan. And then we did some panel fixed effect model and difference approach and interaction effect in a non-linear type of thing. Our finding, it shows, first finding is in the bottom is a number of ethics policy items. For example, how many number of ethics policy items do you have? So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 to 10, and then the digital service export performance. At the big and the first. When the number of ethic policy item is low, there is a negative impact, and then but after a certain threshold value, performance rebound and improves, confirming the U-shaped function. This shows that and also we have a second finding is the combined effect with the AI adoption varies by policy items. So accountability and privacy found that it shows a significant effect, but the other transparency, fairness, and safety one is adverse effect. So, in other words, in digital trade, example, accountability and privacy is considered to be very, very important. So, the policy implication is we should have a tailored, policy design, and also we should have a priority strategy, and also we should have international cooperation, and finally we should have an enhanced implementation, project to be prepared. Okay, this is a conclusion. AI safety governance requires interoperability across ethical, legal, and technical regimes. Without it, regulatory and operational fragmentation increases system risk and compliance burdens. Secondly, on interoperability-oriented governance architecture, combining value alignment, regulatory harmonization, collaborative platform, and integrated compliance systems can transform short-term coordination cost into long-term net benefit. The Korean case demonstrates high normative alignment with the global AI standard, but reveals persistent gaps in implementation, especially in education, in the protection of vulnerable groups. Policy priorities including enhancing policy stability and ex-ante impact assessment, strengthening AI and data literacy, and institutional capacity, and etc. It becomes a very critical thing. Finally, in a future work should develop the more empirical evidence and cross-country comparison to test and define interoperability-oriented models of AI safety governance. Okay, thank you very much. This is my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kim. And Professor Liao and Professor Poonporn are going to ask a question or two, and then one or two questions from the audience. So Professor Liao, please.
Thank you, Professor Kim. I just have one question. It's another question. I just ask you. Can you just express more the experience from South Korea about the transparency of the AI application? Because we know that we like to see how the South Korea government have the efforts to improve the AI explainability and contribute to get the greater the transparency and the public trust in your society. Thank you.
Well, this is a great question. AI transparency is quite. I think the Korea society more and more defines. This is my personal opinion. Transparency is in terms of the data. How do the data treatment is it fair? So is it transparent? So the more and more this transparency becomes a critical issue, and also the Korea last year we called the AI a Basic Act, which is going to be effective on the January of 2026. And recently, we have some, platform, personal data, some, leakage, type of, accident happens. The more and more the society considers this transparency as well as this privacy issues becomes, very critical. Okay. I hope it answered your question.
Yeah, Poonporn.
Hi, Professor Kim. I'm Poonporn from Thailand. In Thailand,
Okay.
we seem like a pro-AI. The government has issued a lot of strategic movement and hoping that AI can contribute economic and social development. And the thing is that when you try to move forward the idea of AI usage and you not focusing too much on laws and legislative framework, which you would love the organization to develop their AI solution or models by themselves. From your perspective, how important for, country to balance between issuing legislative framework to govern AI while allowing the organization freedom to develop the AI solution, which is implies some sort of a ethical risk at the same time?
Well, this is a very, very good question, and I'm not supporter of regulation. But if we don't have the regulations, it creates confusion in the society. So the issue is how much is the optimal number of regulation we need. In terms of AI safety and the risk or type of interoperability issues. That's why interoperability becomes very important, because if one country have some result of a certain regulatory type of example, then the other country can utilize this sort of a thing. Otherwise, many countries and many organizations were trying to establish a certain type of regulation. It could be low level, or it could be a law level, it could be a company level, it could be society level. So that's why I'm not saying that we should have the all type of regulation in terms of AI safety governance, but this is a great early stage of a society of AI safety or governance. So more and more AI becomes more pervasive in the society, and then we should need some certain number of regulation we need. I hope it answered your questions.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there one other question or comment? Well, I think we have time for one. So, yes, please.
Hi, thank you. For just a follow-up to that question on your explanation, given AI and safety is an issue for everyone and it impacts people and people the same everywhere, do you see any harmonizing between regulations across countries and perhaps a Kyoto-like agreement on the regulation? Because from my perspective, safety is safety, right? And they're not that different, the ideas that are coming on. So I want to get your perspective on a global level harmonization on the regulation, perhaps a single global regulation, if at all possible.
I think, this is a great question. But this is my personal opinion. I think it differs depending upon the context of the systems. For example, if the autonomous vehicle, okay, for example, Korea has some sort of testing bed, which is so-called the smart city, and they have implemented AI-based autonomous vehicle, etc. And then this result of this testing bed, and they can be shared with the international community, which becomes very unique and beneficial to other groups. So I would say that it depends on the problem of or the context of the system, and when they share properly, and it could be good. But on the other hand, if there is no guidelines about the safety, and the more and more it can create a confusion in the society. But this is my personal opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kim. Fantastic talk and wonderful discussion. And thanks for Young Sik for the kind invitation. So thank you.
Well, thank you.